We bless his name as you bless me. In the name of Jesus.
Amen.
This morning we're going to be reading a little bit about Jacob. I'm going to read out of Genesis 32:24 through 30. Should be a couple scriptures up on the deal. I'm going to start in verse 24, and it says that, and Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him, and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore is it that thou doest ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, where I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Amen.
Amen.
So, today what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the struggle. I'm going to play a little bit while I talk a little bit. Before I get started, I want to kind of talk a little bit about Jacob. And Jacob, the name means to follow at the heel, or grabber, or deceiver. And then it ended up being Israel. And Jacob and his twin brothers were born to Isaac and Rebekah. We see in Genesis 25:22 through 26, the children struggled in the womb, and she asked God why. And the Lord said, there are two nations in your womb. So he was already predicting that what these two children are going to be. And then we can see at the end of that, he says that Esau was born first, and Jacob hanging on to his heel as they pulled him out. So he was a few seconds behind. He didn't want to be left in there. So then we see in Genesis 25:28 through 34 that Jacob purchased Esau's birthright with bread and stew. And then in Genesis 27:18 through 30, we see that Jacob stole Esau's blessing by deceiving their father as he dressed up like Esau. And basically the rest of his life he kind of hid because he knew Esau was going to kill him. And then in Genesis 35:23 through 26, we see that Jacob had 12 sons. And then we see in Genesis 49:28 that those 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel. So he basically had a long journey. And cut this off. Excuse me one second. And so what I wanted to get with is in this scripture today is we see that, like I said, that Jacob, he had a long journey from being born. He struggled, and I don't really want to get all up into the deal. What I really want to talk about is the scripture in verse 24. And it says that he was left, and I'm going to read this out of New Living Translation. It says, this left Jacob all alone in the camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. And we see in this scripture that what he is Jacob had traveled to go back into Canaan. He left where he was living, and he was basically going to fulfill a prophecy. But what he did is he got up to a certain point, and he stopped. And he sent his wife and his children. He actually had two wives in groups. And so he sent them across before him, and he stayed behind. And that's where it's saying that he was left alone. And then, but he also sent messengers to Esau to kind of bribe him, like, hey, I'll give you all this stuff if you let me enter, because it was where Esau was at. So, with that said, the story of Jacob, like I said, it's, he still feared Esau. And before I get too far along, I want to look at Jacob wrestling with the angel, and I've heard many different scriptures on this and why, and there's so many different theologies of why this is what happened. Some believe that it was he wrestled with Jesus. Some say it was just the heavenly host. But what I want to get to is the point to the wrestling. And I looked it up, in wrestling in Hebrew is abak, and in Greek it is paya, I guess is how you say it, but in English we call it wrestling. But the sport of or activity of grappling, throwing or holding them on the ground, to fight without hitting or kicking, to struggle, deal with, or control something, basically fight and conflict. And then if you really look at the word struggle, it basically has the same definition. It means to fight, to grapple, scuffle. And my most favorite one is it says a violent effort. And I see that in Jacob here. And when I was reading this, I actually heard a minister this last week. He was preaching on, he was doing a deal on Jacob itself and his life story. And when he got to this point, it made me really think of our lives. Is we get to a point in our lives and we have a journey. And right before we get to where we're supposed to be, we start doubting. And we want to be left alone, and we just don't understand, so we just stop. We pause. And here, really thought about this, and I kept asking the question of, why did the angel come to begin with? And what was the purpose in the wrestling? And it kind of was an analogy of we wrestle with ourselves, we wrestle with our souls to get to the point to where we need to be. And like I said, if we really look at this, the whole concept of Jacob and Esau, and like I say, he was scared to cross because he knew more likely Esau was going to kill him. Right. So he sent his family ahead to at least to where they would have something. They would have all the food, and he sent them with all his goods. And it made me kind of think about with him staying behind and thinking, Jacob, it made me think of Matthew 26:41. It says, "Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." And, we get to a point in our lives that is so true. Is the spirit is so willing, but our flesh is so weak, we don't want to go on. We just want to just lay down and go to sleep. But when I was reading this, I kept looking back and I got to thinking about his journey to the point where he was at. And I'm just going to kind of briefly go through this. In Genesis 31:20 through 55, we see that Jacob was being chased by Laban, which is his father-in-law, because he snuck out. They accused him of stealing his stuff and all this. And like I say, it's a great story, just read through it. But Laban and his brothers, they caught up to Jacob in Gilead. And he was basically going to kill him, take back his stuff, and God came to him and told him not to harm him. And so instead of killing him, he had basically made a covenant with Jacob. And so in verse 55 it says, "And early in that morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them, and Laban departed and returned unto his place." So Jacob took off to go, but he was being chased. His whole life, everything he had, and he was in a hurry to get, he got caught up with. And of course he thought he was going to die then, it was going to all be over with, but then the Spirit of the Lord come to him, told him not to harm Jacob. So therefore Jacob was saved. He was blessed again. So then we see later on in chapter 32, verses 1 and 2, we see that he met angels. And it says, "And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of the God met him." And he meets these angels, and it doesn't really describe what was going on with the angels. You just said that he met them. And my personal belief is that they ministered to him, to tell him, but he was still feared. So he sent his messengers ahead with some stuff, and he was trying to bribe Esau. Like, "Hey, I'll give you all this if you just don't kill me." Right. So even after being saved the first time, the Spirit of God going to, and then he seeing angels, he still had the fear. He still had the uncertainty. He still didn't understand what was going on. So he was going to take care of it himself. So he sent the messengers on, "I'll bribe Esau and it'll all be okay." Well, as we read on, we see that, we see in verse 3 and 8, it says, he lies down and he prays. And he starts thinking back of the first time when he came across. And it says here, it says, says when he passed, I'm not going to read the whole deal. It says he had only a staff, and now he has 2 bands and families, and he prays for the Lord to deliver him from his brother. And then that's when the battle comes. Well, what I was trying to get to is the night before, he lay down and he prayed, and he was like, you know, God, I was so blessed because when I came through this way the first time, all I had on me was a staff. This time I come through and I have my 2 families, I have all this stuff, but yet in his mind, he was going to die. So he basically got to the point of his deliverance, he got to the point to where he wanted to be, but now he's facing the worst battle of his life, and he's like, God, please deliver me from my brother. So through all the stuff that he's gone through, and when he got to the point and he had all this great stuff, he still was uncertain about what was going to happen the next day. So as he sent his family ahead of him, and he sent everything he owned, he sent across the brook, and then it came to the point to where he was by himself. And sometimes we need to do that. We need to just get back and just to ourselves and see what God has in store. And then, of course, we see that the angel came and they wrestled. And this is really, I thought about this so much, was we sometimes get so wrapped up in our worries and our thoughts, and we basically struggle within ourselves. And sometimes the Lord has to send something or the angel to wrestle with us to wake us up in the middle of the night and realize it. And what I really liked about this, and like I said, if you read it, it's a great story. But we see here that it says in Genesis 32, 24 through 26, again, I'm going to read it one more time. It says, Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. Now, that's the thing that I want to get really kind of touch base on today. When I read that, I read it a few times in it. I thought about that. I thought sometimes, we let go before we get our blessing. Mm-hmm. We get hurt. And I could just imagine what it felt like when his hip was knocked out of socket. But he had the same tenacity that he had when he was being born, where he grabbed a hold of his brother's ankle and said, No, you're not going nowhere without me. He did the same thing here. Even through all his life's journeys and all the mistakes he made through his life, if you read the life of Jacob, he was a pretty messed up thing. But when it got to the point, he realized, I'm not letting go until I get my blessing. And I believe that's what the Lord's telling us all, is let's not let go until we get the blessing. Amen. Because it's the same as you always hear the stories about, everybody, we try to get to the shortest line, so we keep changing lines, but if you would have stayed in the line you was in the first time, you would have already been done. Uh-huh. Same way like a railroad tracks, you're getting to the railroad tracks and you just want to leave, but you keep thinking, well, the train might be around the bend, so you wait, or if you do turn around and you start driving the other way, you see the railroad track, the lights go up and off, and everybody stays moving. So, I really thought about this, and I really was pondering, and I kept trying to figure out, why would God send an angel for him to wrestle with? And I really kept thinking, and I really was praying, and I thought, well, the only thing that I could come up with is if Jacob would have slept through the night, woke up the next morning without this battle, without this blessing, I think he would have turned around and went back. I really do. I think he was so scared of Esau and so afraid of what was going to happen when he crossed the brook. What would he have done? I really believe that God sent the angel, and it ended up being a battle, but I think it became a battle because of Jacob's nature. Like I spoke before about when we talk about our heart and we talk about the nature of man and who we are. I think because Jacob was who he was, it became that battle. And we do that. So often we become and we let our nature of our man turn back into when we argue with God, or we don't listen, or we just, like I say, we turn around before it's over, before we get the blessing. And here it really struck me was that he wouldn't let go until he got his blessing. Even though his hip was knocked out of socket and he was just, I'm pretty sure he was in massive pain. And so I really thought about that, and I thought, if the Lord probably seen him was, like I said, so he wouldn't. But what I really liked about it, if you read on in verses 33, or chapter 33, 3 through 17, he was so scared of Esau killing him, but Esau ran to him. Not to kill him, but to love him. And then he told him, no, I don't want any of your stuff. I have my own stuff, brother. You take it. And so in verse, I want to just read it real quick. In verse 33:4, it says, and Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And then, and then you read on, like I say, he told him, no, I don't need your stuff. And so God's favor was all around him. And we see through the very starting of the journey, even when he was being chased and he thought he was in a bad place and he didn't know what to do, and his father-in-law caught him, God gave favor to him, and he told his father-in-law not to kill him. So he was blessed in that. His father-in-law left him and blessed him. And then he goes on and he sees the messengers, and then he like I say, he goes to sleep, wrestles with the deal. But the whole concept of it was God had a plan for him. But he had to keep the journey. He had to hang on for the blessing. And I think so many times in our lives and so many times in the things that we do is we let go too soon. We let go that moment before, or we go to sleep, wake up the next day, and still think about the fear instead of letting God do what he has to do. And like we see in this deal, it wasn't that Esau killed him. Esau, God showed Esau, and he came with love, and then he gave him all the stuff, so the favor of God, it was upon him. And so it really makes me think again, like I said, we look through the scriptures, and I see here in Psalms 91:11, and it says, for we shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. If sometimes we could just do that, if we could just let them have, because, you know, we read in Ephesians that we wrestle with not flesh and blood. We wrestle with principalities and powers and all these things we wrestle with. And that's what makes us let go. But if we could just hang on until we get the blessing. Just hang on. And that's what God's been telling me, is just hang on, Timmy. You know, I remember when I used to ride bulls when I was little. A goofy little kid riding bulls. And I remember everybody wanted to learn how to spur, and everybody wanted to learn how to do all this stuff to get more points and get this. And I remember this old cowboy told us one time, he said, you got to learn how to hang on, fellas. Mm-hmm. If you can't hang on, you get bucked up, don't matter if you spur. You learn how to hang on first, and when you can hang on to them, you can ride him for the 8 seconds, then you worry about the spurring and the points and throwing the hat when you're done. Worry about hanging on. And that's what God has really shown me, is worry about hanging on. Hang on with dear life, whether you get your hip knocked out of socket, you get your pride knocked down, you get whatever it is, just hang on. And I really believe that that's what God's wanting us to do. Not just us in this room, but everybody. We get to a point in our lives and we just think, oh man, I can't take it one more day. I can't do one more day. But that's all it takes, is just hold on one more day. You never know. It might be around the corner. It might be in a few seconds, because he tells us in a moment's time, our whole lives can change. You could meet a person. You could do anything. Anything could happen, because our time is not his time. And that's what God is really showing us. And really, I really want to share is like I said, I don't want to keep up much time and keep repeating myself. But I'm going to close with Hebrews 13:1 and 2. And it says in 13:1 and 2, it says, let brotherly love continue. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some had entertained angels unaware. And I read this and it made me think, we always use that scripture because we're blessing somebody or we're doing, but sometimes it's for us too. We're entertaining angels because they protect us. And
Right.
sister let me borrow a book, and it's called The Visitor. It's a Christmas book, and I read it, and come to find out the whole deal, the guest that they had at their house, he was an angel. And it made me really think about it, and I read this about Jacob, and sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's just hanging on, people. It's just, we just gotta hang on
Right.
for one more second. Hang on for one more day. Just hang on, because it is right around the bend, because God says it is. He gives us a promise. And that's the other thing that I want to look at before I close. I know I said I was going to close, but one thing I really got to thinking about in this is in Genesis 28, 10 through 14, after all this was done with Jacob, I wonder if he remembers the dream he had. And if you don't know, it's a great read, but basically, he had a dream of ascending and descending from heaven, and goes to Jacob's ladder, basically. But God showed him a vision that one day, he was going to have these great nations. And he was going to, his children were going to be these great things, which they were, the 12 tribes of Israel. But then it also, if we look at what God told his mother, that your two sons, the reason they're fighting within their womb is because they're going to be two great nations, which they were. So, sometimes we forget what God has told us in the past that affects us, and we let go too soon, and so we may not be able to obtain that. And like I said, I really thought about that, about the wrestling, and I really thought about what if he wouldn't have sent. What if Jacob would have slept through the night, woke up, and he's all alone, and he think, man, it ain't worth it. And then just turn around and go back where he started. And that's what God is really telling me, and not me, but just all of us, in the nation we live in, and the things that are going on, and the prosperity, and all the things that we're going through in our lives today. Just hang on, man. One more second. And that's all I have. If anybody has any prayer requests or anything, just come up and we'll pray. We'll just pray for whoever needs them. God bless and thank you.